Hi there, Year 10. Here is your next lesson, I believe lesson 5 on A Christmas Carol, and today we are going to look at some of the key moments that the ghost of Christmas past evokes, brings forth for Scrooge as he descends into his past, beginning with the sort of his school experience and his little sister, little Fan. So, you should have already read, once again, the PDF, the pages that have been posted for you. If you haven't, you probably want to do that now and pause the video. I want to start by talking about the range of experiences that he had when he was a child, when he was a boy first. Okay, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I'm on page 40, around page 39 to 40 of the novella. And what we sort of meet in this section, actually I'm going to start from page 38, is a younger Scrooge, a much more enthusiastic Scrooge that indeed had some positive experiences within his childhood. The key one that really strikes me is actually at the top of page 38, when it describes the sheer joy that young boy Scrooge sort of gleamed from his reading, from the world of fiction, from the fantastical stories that he would be lost in as a child. And he references a fictional character, Ali Baba, who is a character from a folk tale, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. It was your kind of traditional boyhood adventure tale. And what he does here is he rejoices at this recollection when he sees himself as a boy reading this book. "Why, it's Ali Baba," Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. "It's dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, I know." Okay, so he has this acknowledgement of a moment of a positive experience of pure joy. And I think it's actually really interesting that he noticed Ali Baba, and actually it's twofold. One is a positive experience, one is a negative. In a positive way, it shows that when Scrooge was younger, he had hopes and dreams. He was able to indulge in his creative imagination, okay, which is something that all children should be free to indulge in. Okay, he was not this miserly, aged man of reason and science and disbelief. Okay, as a boy, he was so open to fantasy, to dreams, to hopeful optimism. Okay, and the fact that Scrooge recognizes Ali Baba, or the vision of the tale, and he says so in ecstasy, it shows that joy isn't yet completely lost. It's not completely submerged. It's just been sort of shrouded in the various fixations that he's had since then. Okay, now you could also say, unfortunately, that the fact that young Scrooge only had sort of a fictional character as his sort of sole companion at this sort of boarding school, it also gives us a bit of a clue as to the solitary nature of his childhood. Indeed, it says in the lower half of page 36 that Scrooge, as a child, was a solitary child, neglected by his friends, and he is left there still. So it's Christmas time. Okay, remember, he's showing them the different Christmases of his past, and he is the only pupil left behind, okay, at this school. And this school is a vision of sort of unappealing sort of tragedy. If you look at the top of page 37, the walls were damp and mossy, the windows broken, their gates decayed. It was poorly furnished and cold and vast and chilly. And so there's this lonely boy, and he was reading near a feeble fire. So we have this narrative of his past to imagine this alternative version of Scrooge, a vulnerable boy, made low-spirited, okay, exploited, abused by those he should have trusted, okay, his family who have left him here, and the cruel headmaster of this school as well is referenced. And the only comfort he has to swing back to Alibaba is a fictional character. Okay, and that really compounds his isolation. Okay, the only comfort he can take is from fiction as a child. Okay, so his childhood is kind of a mixed batch, really, of positive and negative experiences. His Christmases as a child were sad. He was neglected. He was left behind, but he still had this fire in his heart, you know, that wasn't completely extinguished through his love of fiction, his love of escapism, his generosity in spirit and heart. Okay, he also is reading, of course, later on, Robinson Crusoe, which is again another boyhood adventure tale. He references this at the bottom of page 38, and he says, "Poor Robinson Crusoe, where have you been, Robinson Crusoe?" The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was the parrot, you know. There goes Friday running for his life to the little creek. So Robinson Crusoe is another fictional character, okay, another kind of swashbuckling adventure hero. So again, when Scrooge realises this, he realises the great sadness of his past and maybe already understands some of the reasons for his current state. Okay, so in summary, you can copy this table down if you like, and you can gather some more quotations for his positive and negative experiences as a child. But I just want to talk about little Fan when she arrives. This is at the top of page 40. Okay, so this is again the same Christmas he's reading, and then his little sister appears in visitation. Okay, so she comes darting in, putting her arms around his neck and often kissing him, addressed him as her dear, dear brother. So we have that term of endearment. He did, year 10, have human connection. He did have family. "I've come to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. "To bring you home, home, home." "Home, little Fan," returned the boy. "Yes," said the child, brimful of glee. "Home for good and all, home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be, that home's like heaven." So again, this is both a positive and a negative here. The positive, of course, is that we have Scrooge's sister, little Fan, who is representative of the best, the very best of Scrooge's youth, of his childhood, of his innocence and of his goodness. Okay, she's this pure ball of energy, brimful of glee. Okay, so we have this beautiful image of reunion, but we get that little mention from little Fan that Scrooge's father and her father, is so much kinder than he used to be. Now that clearly, covertly below the surface seems to hint towards some form of sort of childhood abuse. The idea that his life at home was not an entirely pleasant one either, because of the tyrannical presence of a very cruel father. Okay, so it might well again explain Scrooge's current state. He hasn't always had positive familial models to work from. Okay, so the cruel schoolmaster glared at Scrooge, doesn't want him to leave, but he does, and they dart away. When Scrooge is watching this little memory, he thinks about little Fan in fondness. "She died a woman," said the ghost, "and has, I think, children." "One child," Scrooge returned. "True," said your ghost. "Your nephew." That's at the bottom of page 41. That is where we realise, if we hadn't already, that little Fan is mother to Fred. Now, she's dead in Scrooge's present tense of the narrative, but she died a woman and she had children. Okay, so if Scrooge is not a part of Fred's life, which we know he isn't, then that would suggest to me that Scrooge and little Fan's relationship did unfortunately veer apart. And I have no doubt that would be due to Scrooge's actions, as he chose instead to fixate on business over family. Okay, so in this first moment, okay, with the vision of his childhood at school, the visitation of little Fan, Dickens is revealing to us that Scrooge could change. There is real potential here, okay, because he states this, and this is the first quote on this slide here: "There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something. That's all." He vocalises a moment of regret that, having seen the enthusiasm of little Fan in the memory here as a tableau brought to life before him, he saw that same enthusiasm in the boy that he chased away with his ruler. Okay, so he regretfully mourns that lack of charity and generosity that he didn't provide for that child. Already a sign, a glimmer of hope transpires for the reader. Now, this little reference as well to the father having changed, having become more kinder, maybe having his own sense of epiphany and transforming into a far more benevolent father for Scrooge and little Fan. I think that could be Dickens's way of foreshadowing Scrooge's own metamorphosis, okay, that he'll become so much kinder than he used to be. If it takes a kind of familial trend, right? He becomes like his father and alters his ways. Did his father have his own three spirits? I wonder. Okay, so the seeds of change are there. I see it happening already. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video, your lesson slides don't go into too much detail regarding Fezziwig, but I would like to talk about him here because he's quite integral. I group Fezziwig along with Bob Cratchit and Fred. So Fezziwig, Bob Cratchit, and the Cratchits as a whole, really the whole family, and Fred, right? Those three. Those together, they are the catalysts. They are the models of benevolence. They are figures that inspire great change in Scrooge. So who is Fezziwig and how is he introduced? So the next memory that Scrooge is ferried over to by the ghost is a Christmas party when he was a young man. So we go from child to young man. When he was apprenticed, he was an apprentice for the employer Fezziwig. Okay, so Fezziwig owns his own business. He is a business owner, but he is very different to Scrooge as a business owner. Okay, we'll talk about more about that in a second. So what have I got? I've got some quotes here. So how does Dickens describe Fezziwig, and how does this contrast the way Scrooge is portrayed as a boss in Stave 1? Look at these quotes. I would write these down for Fezziwig. I would create a little box of ideas about his character. So these are some quotes for him. So he laughed all over himself, from his shoes to his organ of benevolence. I think the organ of benevolence that Dickens references here is his face, which involves his mouth, right? So his head, he laughs. His laugh seems to be so large that it's from his toes all the way up to the tip of his head. His whole body shakes, right, with happiness and joy. It's Christmas Eve in this memory, actually. And what Fezziwig says to his employees, Scrooge amongst others, he says, "Yo ho, my friend," says Fezziwig, "no more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick, Christmas Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up," cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands before a man can say Jack Robinson. So he basically, as soon as the working day is done, he calls to his workers, who he calls my boys. And there's that real term of endearment. There's that affection to that possessive pronoun, and he calls for them to put their work aside Okay, instantly, as soon as the time is done, open up the shutters, okay, the doors to the work, so the light spills in from the street and people are welcomed in for a huge party. He tells them to get the room ready for a party, and fuel was heaped upon the fire. Okay, and the warehouse was a snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. This is at the bottom of page 43. This scene that Fezziwig creates through his enthusiasm and call for celebration is a scene that is filled with warmth and light. Does it ring any bells? Maybe that is a direct contrast to the working conditions that Scrooge creates for poor old Bob Cratchit in his dismal cell in Stave 1. Okay, so this whole section on Fezziwig, and it does go on for a good few pages, you want to read them all, it's just filled with light imagery, and it's a warm scene both in temperature and in emotion. Okay, even Fezziwig himself, and I'm here, this last quote, has a positive light that is seen on his calves as he dances. So there's even light sort of emanating from him. He is this vessel for light, for hope, for goodness, for spirituality and Christmas spirit. Okay? So when you actually look at the party itself, when it kicks off, there is so much movement in this party. Even when Scrooge and his work friend heed the call, right, for the party, they charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3, had them up in all their places. 4, 5, 6, barred them, pinned them. 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses. Look at the sheer enthusiasm that young Scrooge, or at least young adult Scrooge, had, okay, when he was called for this party. There is enthusiasm, there's fervour, it's filled with verbs, okay? And the party kicks off, and there is a dance, there is a huge dance, okay? And there's so much repetition in this moment. I'm on page 45 now, second paragraph down. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. It goes on and on and on, right? It's pretty much a huge paragraph. And then it discusses the dance, okay, and the dance of all the guests that have been invited, okay? This is a beautiful portrait of Christmas spirits. There are the bright faces of the guests of, younger Scrooge. There is heart and soul in the scene. And Scrooge watches this and is completely overwhelmed with joy for this scene and what it conveys to him. And this scene overwhelms the senses. I'm here in this yellow box. Fezziwig's generosity, it's physical, right? Because he puts on this massive party, not just for those that work for him, but for his neighbours. There is so much food, and there is alcohol, negus, a very festive drink. So not only is he physically generous in that sense, but he's emotionally generous in how fond he is of his employees, and his friends and his family. Okay, as an employer, and this is so key, he is a foil to Scrooge. Okay, as an employer, really key you get that down. Okay, so let's sum it up then. What does Scrooge learn from Fezziwig? And this in the centre is the conclusion that Scrooge comes to when he talks about what Fezziwig does. It says, he has the power to render us happy or unhappy, right? He is an employer. He has that power to make our service light or burdensome, right? To make us enjoy our job or hate it. Make it a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things too slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add or count up. What then? This is key here. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. Scrooge here is learning that what has value in life is not how much money someone has or is able to distribute or give to others, but actually it's more about the good deeds that they enact, the happiness they communicate. That is worth a fortune. And I've put it here, it is no small matter to those who experience the fruits of Fezziwig's generosity. His generosity is worth a fortune to those that, you know, are with him. Worth a fortune. Now, when he sees this, he says, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. And that clerk, you'd turn is Bob Cratchit. He says, you know what? After this memory, I cannot believe what I've failed in doing as an employer. Now, again, seeds of change, hope for transformation. He does end it though with saying that's all. So I don't think he's quite there yet, right? He's not there. He's not changed. He's not transformed completely. There is hope, but he's not yet comfortable with it. Okay, so here are some words I would use to describe him. He is full of benevolence. He is a champion for community. He is full of spirit, goodness, light. Okay, he is full of respect and gratitude. He has his family at the centre of his world. And you know what? If you want a big idea, grade 9, he shows the other side to capitalism. I know capitalism has always been taught to be the big bad, but actually capitalistic systems can work if they're done correctly, okay, within a kind of more sort of socialist lens. And that is the idea that it can be a system that works for the economy and, you know, make sure, you know, a country is stable and thriving, but it doesn't enslave those that work for it. All right, he clearly does well. He clearly is a comfortable man and is a success in business, but he treats his workers fairly. And that is really such an important message for the Victorian upper class, the readers of this novella. You don't need to give up your money, right? We're not telling you that. We're telling you to rethink how you treat those who are not as fortunate. Okay, and that's what we learn from Fezziwig. I hope that's been really helpful for you. There's quite a big section there. You're going to need to, you know, get this done for next Tuesday. You've got the long weekend. I don't want you to slave away over this, right? But you do need to understand Fezziwig is really key. Okay, so the first two images from his past, his boyhood and his young adulthood. Okay, any questions? Pop them below. Thank you.